Hello, America. Welcome to the Junto Podcast, where we promote the practical applications of critical thinking and bold creativity. I'm your host, Edgar Mills. Thank you for joining us. Hello, America. Welcome back. This is episode 67, and I appreciate you guys sticking around. So what are we talking about today? Well, there was a spark. There was a little spark that launched my curiosity. But what we're talking about broadly is the epic, multi-layered system of contradictions that we get from the progressive left, the hard left, modern leftism, democratic socialism, and what some people call liberalism, but is not very liberal at all. And these contradictions are not just inconsistencies in their thought process. These are friggin' foundational. The whole leftist ideology is built on contradiction. And I refer you back to my episodes on communism. The same people who, you remember last year, a couple years ago, punch a Nazi in the face. Well, by that sentiment, that's awesome. But the same people say love is love. Love, not hate. And then they're the same people, this movie that just got released a few weeks ago, Citizen Vigilante. People were screaming about how racist it is. But then they'll turn around and praise and glorify Luigi Mangione for assassinating a health insurance company CEO. So it just depends on who it is, right? So we're going to look at some of this stuff. I'm trying a new method here. I'm reading my notes from the computer instead of printing. I'm killing trees over here by printing. So anyway, the little spark though, what sparked me? There was this month, it just happened. Atlantis Event Charters, they chartered the Virgin Voyages, the Scarlet Lady. It's a cruise ship. And this was a LGB themed cruise, and it had something like 1,900 passengers, all celebrating the gayness and all that. And mostly it was Americans and Australians. Well, they were on a cruise, and there was a planned stop in Turkey, like Istanbul and some other coastal spot there in India, Turkey, and they got turned away. Erdogan, the Turkey government would not let them dock, and they cited that, and the Turkish government cited that ship was known for behaviors that do not align with the structure of our society and our moral values. And that might be true, but I don't know, it's a little steep. And then they tried to reroute and go to Alexandria, Egypt, which back in the day was a vacation spot, was a go-to spot for well-to-do world travelers. I wouldn't think anymore. I don't know. Well, they got turned away from Egypt as well. Turns out the Muslim Brotherhood doesn't care for gays. So I guess there was no pride parade on the Nile that week. And this wasn't, this was Turkish and Egyptian policy. This is not, and in Turkey since 2015, because both of those are Islamic countries, and they're both very anti-homosexuality, and homosexuality is stigmatized heavily and criminalized heavily. And the thing, the response from the progressives and the left has been nothing. There's been no cries to boycott Turkey and Egypt or to bring them some kind of higher level of enlightenment. There's been no epic lectures to the governments of Turkey and Egypt. And all the well-to-do westernized leftist finger pointers who spend years and decades lecturing America and Europe on LGBT rights and tolerance and acceptance and all that stuff. And they demand that we have rainbow flags in every government building and every school. What did they suddenly discover cultural relativism? I don't know, man. It's well, I guess it's okay if the rejection comes from Muslim majority nations, because I don't know. I guess tolerance has hard borders, unlike America. Well, speaking of that, so the contradiction I'm pointing out there is that there's been zero outcry. There's been zero rebuke from the left. So let's look at Queers for Palestine. Now, look, I'm not just picking on queers and LGBT. Well, I'll get to other things, but I just think that's one of the most glaring contradictions. Is the Queers for Palestine. They're out there waving their rainbow flags alongside Palestinian flags, which, by the way, the Palestinian flag was created by an English politician. Anyway, they wave flags right alongside each other at protests, and you got gays out there chanting "From the river to the sea." No idea what they're talking about, but they're chanting it in solidarity, in support of an organization who Hamas, in support of Hamas. That's the dominant leadership faction in Palestine. In Gaza and the West Bank, homosexuality, depending on exactly it could be a capital offense. Definitely a crime. Male homosexuality can get up to 10 years in prison, up to 10 years. And Pew Research's polls shows that somewhere around 93% of Palestinians reject homosexuality. That's unheard of when it comes to polling, getting a 93% rating like that. The Palestinians do not love the gays. So it blows my mind why the gays are out there marching. And I'll give you a real world example. Obviously there are gay Palestinians, right? I mean, there's, however you shake it down, there are gay people everywhere. They've been murdered with videos out there on the internet, by the way. And much of the Gaza, West Bank, the Palestinians who are gay, where'd they go? Yeah, they went to Israel. They sought refuge in Israel because there's a polar opposite contrast in Israel. They have pride parades and legal protections and all that stuff. And in fact, in a region that's Muslim, fully Muslim, Israel is the only nation that has decriminalized homosexuality. But the Queers for Palestine still exist. They still persist. And there are some activists out there that said they feel safer in Gaza than in Israel. Is that right? Do you think that's true? Or is that just some hyperbolic nonsense to try to get some emotionally charged? God dang. The cognitive dissonance for these people is at cosmic levels. Oh, man. The left's obsession with this hierarchy of oppression, right? So an oppressed Palestinian is higher on the hierarchy than an actual gay person's safety, whether they're Palestinian or not. I wonder how they feel about Jewish gays in Israel who are serving in the Jewish military, the IDF. Are they off the Christmas list? I don't know, man. So the contradiction, the just mind-blowing contradiction is that they support a movement that would, if given power, execute and imprison every queer marching with Palestine. And what is that? Why? I don't understand. It's just ideological masochism, I guess. I don't know, man. They're so eager to virtue signal for whoever, well, really, whoever's the most anti-American gets the most sympathy, I guess. It's the way I think it's going down. All right, now I'm going to come off the gays a little bit. On college campuses in America, since somewhere around the 20 teens, black activist students and black activist groups have made calls for race-exclusive spaces in order to organize and do social justice work. The University of Michigan Students for Justice pushed for permanent central campus space that was dedicated to community, organizing and social justice work exclusively for black people. And there's been similar demands around other colleges and all over the place. And then there's been calls for race-based housing programs and black-only lounges and places for black people to exist. This is the same, the people making the left, the people who support this and call for this, the same people that carry on about Jim Crow 2.0 but they just, all the left likes to do is rebrand. So they just taken the segregation and they're rebranding it as safe spaces. And they justify it with it's healing from oppression. Oh my God. In Canada, there's some universities, I don't know how many, but they've added black only swim times and lounges in their fitness and pool spaces. So what's the principle here? Well, the principle is segregation is evil unless our side does it in the name of equity. But that's the opposite of equity, isn't it? Now, if you use a metric of violence to justify segregation, well, black people commit the most violence, so we should segregate them over here. Oh my God. The left would literally erupt in violence, ironically. Well, so what's the result of this particular topic? Well, it normalizes the idea that different races require different rules in different spaces. They're normalizing that, but for their own cause. You throw the same idea out there with a different justification in it. Oh my God, the world's coming to an end. It's a contradiction. It doesn't jive. It doesn't make any sense. The civil rights movement marched and protested peacefully, mind you, for integration. And what they're calling for is the absolute opposite of that. And it is, I hate this catchphrase, but I'll say it, it is what it is. You can a rose by any other name. You can call it something, some semantic fucking catchphrase, but it's still segregation. And I think it's still wrong. Am I wrong? Have I missed the boat on that? I don't know. Madness, contradictions of epic proportions. Speaking of violence, mass immigration from Muslim-majority countries into Europe and the U.S. since the early 2000s has been pushed hard by the progressive left. And they call it a moral necessity. It's a moral obligation. And if you question it, you're racist or xenophobic. But what's happening in America now, and Europe, it's been, I think Europe worse than America, but there are parallel lines of effort going on, and they're trying to pump up the numbers of Muslim elected officials in America. And we're seeing it most famously with Mamdani, most recently with Mamdani in New York, but several at local levels, right? Already at the national level, there are 4 notable Muslims in the House of Representatives. An American dude named Andre Carson from Indiana, and then Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, Rashida Tlaib from Michigan, and then I don't know this lady's first name, but Ansari in California. In Europe, the most famously is Sadiq Khan, who's the mayor of London, one of the most notable metropolitan spaces in the world. And you're seeing it's not racist to think, and it's not xenophobic to think that they have allegiance to a higher purpose. Progressive leftism is not their purpose. And you're going to see, well, in New York, you're already seeing all these socialist programs rolling out, and already corruption is, oh man. But ultimately, you're going to see some transitions into some other things. So some communities have organized efforts to put these sort of Islamist religious figures into office in the name of diversity. That's the cover story, is diversity. And but you got to look at our polls, the end all be all? No, but Pew Research is one of the big ones, but there's others that consistently show that substantial numbers of minorities, and especially among younger generation Muslims, they favor Sharia law. And if they have a sympathetic view of Sharia law, eventually, if enough people, you have people in office, and you start going to these city councils and these whatnot, and they're going to start voting in these little incremental changes that are consistent with Sharia law, not consistent with our Constitution. And these young people who they want to have Sharia to have a preferential role in law. And a lot of them cite in matters for like family matters, right? In France, there's surveys that show half of young Muslims want Sharia to take precedence over French law in areas like marriage, inheritance, things like that. Same in Germany. But I'm going to show you a weird contradiction here. In the UK, there's been a famous ongoing sort of problem with rape gangs. Yeah, grooming gangs, they call them. So that shows us another layer of Islam, because that is unique. And predominantly the perpetrators of that are Pakistani Muslims. And we're discovering that they've exploited thousands and thousands of vulnerable young English girls. And in England, I don't know what's going on over there. The authorities are scared they're scared to confront any brown person whatsoever, because heaven forbid they be accused of racism. So meanwhile, crime just goes unchecked. And then you as an Englishman try to call it out, and you get rolled up for being racist. Like literally rolled up and arrested. So from the 2010s onward, you can do the math and see that in England, the amount of Muslim population and the amount of Muslim involvement in their institutional failure is very, right? Their institutions are crumbling. And I'm going to refer you back to the Cloward-Piven theory that I was talking about. And these are American people. It's not, but it's similar, right? They're overwhelming their systems, and they're not looking at second and third order effects. and their systems are becoming overwhelmed, and then their systems in England are just going to be taken over by Muslim guided systems. And then if you're English, well, you're fucked. But here in America, everywhere, progressives love to frame any discussion on Muslim failure to integrate or adopt American or Western values. That any discussion on parallel societies and shadow governments, or any discussion on Sharia implementation, you're just, boom, you're a bigot. That's it. They just throw it off, write it off. Don't examine it at all. Don't take it at face value and go, well, let's look into that and look at the facts. And all this sort of demographic and political entry into the legislature, right? The Muslim and Islam are getting people in these political offices. That is treated like it's unassailable. Well, you can't question that. But even as ongoing events and strategies that we see before our very own eyes plays out in front of us in America and Europe, that Muslims want to bring Islamic legal norms, i.e. Sharia law, to America and to Europe. Many of them have even stated such. But you get wrote off as being a bigot. And the progressive left don't want to look at the facts. In America, they see Muslims as votes. That's good. That's a guaranteed Democratic vote, which is another contradiction, isn't it? If you want to compare value systems, the extremes of Sharia, how is that in any way compatible with progressive ideology? So in my opinion, the contradiction is that the left, they will support anything that's an anti-American system of governance. Even if it puts Muslims in position of power, that will one day, sooner than later, end up hanging those same progressives from a noose on the end of a crane on national television. I say on national television, on nationalized television, because there won't be any free media anymore. The contradictions are cosmic. I'm going to stay on Muslims a little bit. And when I say Muslims, I'm hammering the progressive left here. I don't agree with Islam. But if I go to Saudi Arabia, that's what I expect. I don't have to like it, but I am now in a different country. I'm not going to go to Saudi Arabia, put my Trump hat and American short shorts on, run around screaming, change your laws. But the ongoing contradiction here is that progressives routinely attack Christian values and influence with maximum disrespect. Routinely. They mock believers. They want to get rid of any reference to any Christian symbol or references in any school setting or any public setting. And they frame traditional Christian views on marriage and sexuality as bigotry. And then they want to try to, every Christian is a secret Christian nationalist. That's their go-to boogeyman for Christians. Oh, the Christians are going to take over. It's going to be Handmaid's Tale. But those very, very same circles that shit on Christianity defend Islam, or worse yet, collaborate with Islamist movements in efforts to support taqiyya, right? The downplay. The Muslims will downplay the Islamic doctrine in the West, and they will, Islam is the religion of peace. But their doctrine punishes, and oftentimes by death, apostasy, blasphemy. What of women's rights? What are the women's rights in an Islamist nation? They're non-existent. Homosexuality, punishable by death in many Muslim nations. Somehow Christianity is the all-powerful oppressor. Because we say, hey, it's wrong. Homosexuality is wrong as per the Bible. But Christians still let you live and let live, whereas Islam don't do that. The progressives love, like I said, the Christianity, that's the all-powerful oppressor, and then Islam is the oppressed. Or Islam is within the group of oppressed. The gays are oppressed. The blacks are oppressed. Everybody that has any leftist ideology whatsoever, Christianity is oppressing. So if you're in the big victim pot, you do whatever you want. But why not just look at the historical and current track record of Islam? It's a theocracy. And furthermore, it's a authoritarian theocracy. And you can see it in Muslim nations around the world. The contradictions are so ridiculous. It's when it comes to the left and Islam, the contradictions are ridiculous. You can be secular and you can reject Christianity and then somehow embrace Islam. And again, if they were in power here, if they were the majority power here in America, they would impose far more oppressive and stringent laws to include hudud punishment, crimes against Allah, which is probably death, right? That's not even consistent with anti-theism, right? Anti-atheism. That's not even consistent with secularism because you're supporting even a worse creature than what you claim to hate. So ultimately, what is it? It's just selective anti-Americanism. That's what it is. The contradictions are insane. All right. What's some other little contradictions that we see all the time? Now, I was talking about the gays and Islam and all this and that. And I touched on it a minute ago, but what about the feminists in America? What about feminism? Women's autonomy and women's rights and all that stuff. That crashes and burns, man. As soon as you put the hijab on or the burqa, because that's what American feminists, they will cover and defend and say, oh, that's their choice. They're empowered because they're making the choice. What about honor killings? What about that? What about a dad who kills his 22-year-old daughter for putting makeup on and dressed in Western and going out of the house without her cover on? Or an American dude comes and knocks on the door to ask his daughter out, for a date. He's not going to get punished. She is. And maybe by death. Honor killings, man. What about that? What do the feminists have to say about that? I don't hear progressive left feminists speaking up too much about Islam. I hear them speaking up all the time about Christianity. And along those same lines, did you know that female genital mutilation is still a thing in Muslim immigrant communities? Is it prevalent? I doubt it. And is it all Muslim communities? I doubt it. I don't know that the whole Muslim faith practices that, because you don't get enough information. There's not enough information out there about it. But you could argue that we're doing that in America, right? By doing gender transitions for minors. Is that not a contradiction? Cutting off a little boy's cock or putting a little girl on hormone blockers. To me, that's right up there with female genital mutilation. And I promise you, in the Muslim communities, the females do not choose that. What about polygamy? Is that a feminist issue to bother with? I mean, I think the Mormons still do that too, right? Do they get shit on? I think so. Do the Muslims get shit on? I don't think so. Not only multiple wives, but, well, in some Muslim countries, you got 50-year-old men marrying 10-year-old girls, getting sold off to them or for marriage or whatnot. So where are the feminists at on all this stuff? The leftist feminists, where are they at on all this stuff? Now, I'm not assuming all feminists are leftists. I'm kind of speaking in general terms, but there are libertarian and more conservative feminists who simply believe that, in women's empowerment and all that without adding all this political ideology onto it. It seems like a political thing, but it's not. It's a cultural thing. It's sort of about societal norms and attitudes. So, yeah, I'm not assuming all feminists are progressive leftists, but I don't hear the progressive leftists speaking up about it. So the burqa, I guess, depending on who, if you're on the left, you can say the burqa empowers women. If you're on the right, you go, that seems very oppressive to me. Contradictions. So, in a whole different direction, what of these folks who promote and even champion drag queen story time in elementary schools and whatnot? And then they turn around and become speech code enforcers, and they attempt with all their power to deplatform anybody who disagrees or critiques. And then they feel like they have sole domain over defining what hate speech is. Meanwhile, completely excusing like their side inciting violence or telling you to go out and kill a Nazi, or because they're speaking of codes, Nazi is code for anybody who's not a progressive leftist. There's a contradiction there. They want it for everybody. They want to define and characterize what is able to be freely spoken about and critique. It's a contradiction. It's a gigantic contradiction. Free speech, by the way, is one of the only things that we're talking about here that shows up in our Constitution as an unassailable, unalienable right, not to be tampered with, not to be tinkered with. Free speech. Where's some other unique contradictions? What about all these climate activists who make just unreasonable demands on America and Europe about the way we produce energy and the way we grow food and consume food even? And they'll lecture us on sacrifice, on environmental stewardship, and then they will ally with China or India on some geopolitical thing, and to go right along with whatever's convenient. Do a Google Maps search of Mumbai or New Delhi or somewhere. Find one of the big cities and just kind of zoom in and look at the rivers. Look at the Ganges River. You got all the the liberals love the sort of Hindu sort of stuff and the yoga and all those Eastern influences that are all peaceful and all this and that. And then they're going to lecture us about environmentalism. Go check out the Ganges River. Epic contradictions. What's another thing? I'll tell you what, let's go back to communism. The lefty, progressive, socialist whatnots, they love to use rhetoric where they centralize the working class. The working class. We have to seize the means of production. They couldn't do it without the working class. And they push that identity. And then they push these sort of identity hierarchies that and these rhetorical arguments that completely disregard actual workers who just want to make a living. Yeah, I need a job. I want a job. Well, we got to strike. We got to come together. We got to unionize. But if that same worker don't use the correct pronouns or don't agree that reparations are a thing, then that person is cast out. You're cast out. You're no longer a part of the victim class. You're a victimizer. Same guy. 2 days later, he's now a victimizer, where he was a victim because it fit a narrative here, but he disagrees with your narrative, so now he's an oppressor. Class warfare. Fuck out of here. All right, I am going to wrap this up here. This is, well, a minute. How the liberals, the progressive liberals, juxtapose individual liberty with absolute government control is beyond me. And the philosophical crux of the matter is that, well, classical liberalism, which I would consider myself a classical liberal, because I kind of liken that to libertarianism of today. Classical liberalism valued individual rights over state power, for sure. Freedom of speech, freedom of property, to own property, freedom to exercise your own conscience as you see fit, as long as it doesn't violate non-aggression, and limited government, absolute minimal government. That's classical liberalism. How the leftists got tagged with the term liberal, I don't understand. Modern progressivism is the opposite of everything I just said. They want expansive, massive state control over the means of production, energy, economy, healthcare, industry. They want to choose who the redistribution efforts go to, who has to give in order for us to decide who gets. Over-regulating business, they do that. That's their shtick. Taxes, that's their shtick, is they tax everything possible. Modern progressives are not for free speech for everyone. It's provable. And they coined the term hate speech, however long ago, the 90s maybe. And then they even not only want to ban certain speech, but they want to compel certain speech. There was a little error there, time period there, just in the past few years, that heaven forbid you misgender someone. Your whole life and career ruined. Or never mind, even by accident, on purpose. You're ruined. That's compelled speech. That's not free speech. They want to take over education. They want to replace actual metric, what's the word I'm looking for? Merit with DEI policies. In fact, is it Oregon, Washington State, maybe somewhere, maybe is it a mayor or is it the governor? They're taking away metrics for education, like testable metrics. So it's all kind of fluid, and there's nothing to pass or fail. Now, there's different types of education out there, folks, but this ain't going to work out, I promise you. Everything that they've done in the Great Northwest has come back to bite them in the ass. I point you to defund the police. Hell, they even want to control biology, the progressive left. And they want government to pay for transitions. And they want transitions to be able to start as a minor, and they want to enforce that. They want to mandate that. So they're the opposite of classical liberals. But when it comes to personal stuff, liberties, they're abortion. Yeah, it's your thing. You do what you want. If it's drugs, oh yeah, we'll build a clinic for you to go shoot up in, and so you can have a safe place. Or sexuality, yes, go be as promiscuous as you want. Have sex with everybody. Good. Yes. It's a core personality. Yeah, it's not just a deviation. It's natural. Yeah, it's just a sexual orientation. You want to have sex with kids? Sure. Sexual orientation. They're happy to be very libertarian on that. Do what feels right. Do what feels good to you. That's all good until what feels good to you is in contrast with them. On everything else in a functional society, the left is not quite so. What about controlled borders? No, forget it. They don't want that. You To have a functional society, you need that. How you control them is one thing. That's another argument. That's another chapter. That's another podcast. The fact is, there needs to be some level of control and accountability. What about reducing crime? What about criminal justice reform? Where are they at on that? Where are all these liberal politicians on that? If they were serious about it, they wouldn't try to go from A to Z to completely overhaul. They would incrementally fix problems to a point to where you got from A to about, L. Because there's always going to be this. So compromise is necessary, but they refuse. The hard right and the hard left refuse to compromise. What about family structure? The bedrock of our society. The progressive left want to get rid of it. They want the family structure to be the government. And they love to say, here's their favorite thing, it takes a village. I wish I could remember the exact quote. A liberal politician said that your children, that you don't have domain over your children, the government does, something like that. I paraphrase that. I wish I could remember it though. Damn, I wish I would have looked that one up. I remember it, I just don't remember the person. Yeah. The progressive left are not liberal. They want max control. And they want to do it via government, via law. So that now if you oppose, you're insurrectionists. Punishable probably by death. Yeah. So all that, all this stuff, all these little selective little catchphrase, slow, your body, your choice. Well, that's great. Well, your body, your choice. Kill the baby if you want. What about meat is murder? Don't kill the cow. You can't kill the cow. but you can kill the baby. So for the progressive left, the collective decides the value of life. And that as defined by the bureaucrats and the activists within the collective. At some point, you, as a follower of this ideology, you're not a decision maker. So then there's going to be a hierarchy. And so up here at the very highest, they're still eating meat, by the way. They'll tell you meat is murder, but they're eating really good meat. And you're not going to be getting any of that. So the result of all this contradiction is just a jumbled and incoherent system. I started to hesitate to even call it a system, but it is a system. I think the contradictions are a part of the strategy. But what it truly is authoritarianism wrapped up in the logic of, they use the word liberal logic, but it's not. I think even the word liberal is strategic to try to, because the left loves to redefine things. They love semantic. They do the semantic battles. They don't do substantive battles. They don't argue substance. It's all semantics. Much like communism. Exactly like communism. Anybody who argues that the progressive left does not want full-blown communism is either willfully blind or ignorant. So the contradictions are epic. They hate Christians. They hate Christian influence, which our country was founded on Christian influence. It was, whether you like it or not. All the men, I can't remember the number, I think all but 2 of the men that signed the Declaration of Independence were Christians. And they all, at some point or another, in some document or another, quoted the influence of faith on our founding. Okay, that's fact. But the left hates the Christian influence on anything to do with government. But then they tolerate the import of Sharia ideology. And they have much, much more aggressive theocratic ambitions than the Christians do, I promise you. They demand segregated spaces while decrying segregation. They champion the oppressed and the victim, and then implement policies that hurt the oppressed and the victim with all this orthodoxy, because they want a level of purity for sure, but they want it to be pure leftist purity. So again, I said I think a lot of this is strategy. It's not the contradictions aren't just like, oh man, they're just dumb. They're not dumb. The people crafting all this stuff, they're not dumb at all. So I think it is strategy. And these contradictions aren't just random glitches in the thought process. And otherwise, they're not glitches in a solid system. They're features of the system. They're features of this ideology that, well, really prioritizes power and control, especially control over the narrative, the way you feel. And they prioritize that power and that control over consistency and over actual human progress, individual human progress. They can't stand for an individual to succeed on his own merit. They can't stand it. If you succeed, we got to make a policy to where everybody else succeeds. Well, that's impossible. So what does their policy do? It takes the one who succeeded and knocks them down. Most of these things I said, well, there's a lot of factual stuff in there that I stated, right? Factual stuff. And all those facts, however you shape them up, whatever, they don't care about your intersectional flowcharts, right there. These contradictions are dangerous. And I hope they're unsustainable. I think they're unsustainable. A contradiction can't last that long. Sooner or later, somebody sees it, recognizes it, calls it out, and quashes it. So they're definitely dangerous, especially if they're done as a strategy on purpose. But I hope that they're unsustainable and that they can't succeed. Because reality does have a way about exposing that stuff. Reality is that one unknown it'll get you. So what I'm leaving you with, folks, is be curious about the contradictions. Think, like, if it sounds like it is a contradiction, be curious about it. Examine it. But be very skeptical of it. See what the deeper motives are. Is there a motive? Is it some accidental contradiction? Or does it look like it's designed to create this in order to achieve this? Be curious, but be skeptical, folks. That's what I'm leaving you with. Be curious, but be skeptical. All right. That's it, folks. I appreciate you guys. Please go check out ospreyshootingsolutions.com/consulting for all your security consulting training and needs. ospreyshootingsolutions.com for your shooting needs. I got some stuff in August. And we got a new, I just put up yesterday, armed self-defense force on force. I think that was kind of popular, so a few people have asked. So we're doing another one in September. Please go to twoteamguys.com and check out all of our leadership and team building offerings, the courses. They're all adventurous. They're all scenario-based with the exception of land navigation. And they're all very, very rewarding. thejutopodcast.com. I know you listen to the podcast on whatever platform, Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever, but there's a website also. And then finally, please, if you feel so guided, give a few bucks to givesendgo.com/help a homie fund so that we can help people in need. I appreciate you guys and I love you guys. Take care.